back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey man, this time they'll do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, it's time for Keeping Sports with M3, powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everything's going well for you here on this Tuesday, the 6th day of September. Yeah, I know, a rare Tuesday that we're doing this due to Labor Day taking place yesterday. I hope all of you had a very pleasant, relaxing, safe, fun Labor Day weekend. Been kind of a long Labor Day weekend for yours truly, quite frankly, considering, as I've told most of you on here before, I work at the Amazon warehouse up in Carteret, New Jersey. And as I was leaving on Thursday night, they informed us that they're going to be shutting down temporarily. Rumor has it that they may have failed safety inspection, or who knows what went down there truly, but have had an extra long weekend, a couple of paid days off, coming in ready, relaxed, and sit here for about an hour and talk about sports like I like to do each and every single week. And a lot of mix in along the way today, give you some thoughts on the Donavan Mitchell trade, which went down middle of last week. What's likely the end of Serena Williams' long, lustrous career, as well as some things going on in the NFL, because, hey, this coming Thursday, it's time, people. It's football time. Finally going to get the 2022 season started with the Bills and the Rams on Thursday Night Football. And in the coming days, I will have my predictions for the 2022 season. I know we'll probably make one friend of mine pretty happy when he sees them, but get to a lot of that later. Of course, I want to start with what's been the angst of my existence for the last 2 months, and what really should not be, but that's the New York Yankees, who, right now, I should have my feet up, relaxed, all comfortable, watching the Yankees cruise to the American League East Championship, with the only question in mind being, are they going to be in first place overall in the American League, have home field advantage throughout the postseason, with the only thing to watch from this team is Aaron Judge going to break Roger Maris's single-season franchise and American League record for home runs. But no, for the last 2 months, as I've talked about in earnest on here, they've decided to take one big, giant crap on all of that. Because for the last 2 months, hey, Aaron Judge has done his job. Aaron Judge has showed up each and every single night and brought forth what you would expect out of a New York Yankee. Aaron Judge, since the All-Star break, is batting .340. While the rest of this pedestrian offense, and God, it's pedestrian. I was surprised that it was this high, is batting .207. Aaron Judge has 21 home runs since the All-Star break. The rest of the team combined has 32. And quite frankly, this mess, this slide that this team has been on for the better part of the last 2 months, going 20 since their amazing 61-23 start. The blame goes on everybody here, from the top of the organization all the way down. I mean, of course, you have to blame the players, number one, because they have the ultimate control of win-loss total. Boone or the nerds in the analytic department can set whatever lineup they want. At the end of the day, it's a matter of these guys going out there and hitting. And the fact that you've got nothing out of Josh Donaldson since May. Giancarlo Stanton is as hot and cold a streaky player as you're going to find in this sport. DJ LeMahieu, since this toe thing cropped up, has no power whatsoever. Can't even get a single. Aaron Hicks has been a nothing all year. Gleyber Torres has disappeared since the All-Star break. There's just someone out there wearing his jersey right now. And whether it's he's still completely screwed up from being a shortstop the last 2 years, or he's just not as good as we once thought he was going to be. Maybe he's going through that same slide that derailed Gary Sanchez's Yankee tenure, and just saw him hit a bomb against the Yankees yesterday. All the way around, you look at this lineup. I mean, right now, the guy who's been the most consistent after Judge in this lineup all year has been Jose Trevino. And that's not supposed to be the case. Trevino, what you get out of him is supposed to be a luxury, not a necessity. He's supposed to just be down there in the 7, 8, or 9 spot in the lineup, hit a cute little 240 with his 10 home runs, and bring great defense. Not where you're relying on him to be the second best player in this lineup, especially now at a time where they've lost Benintendi for who knows if it's the rest of the season due to this hamate bone injury. And they haven't had Matt Carpenter for about a month now, and we'll see if he's able to come back before the end of the regular season. I mean, this lineup is a mess, especially, and what hurts the most is the starting pitching's been fine. The starting pitching, as annoyed as I was about the Montgomery trade, as much as it stinks that they've been without Luis Severino since July, starting pitching has not really been the problem. You got a workman's effort out of Taillon yesterday after what was kind of an iffy last couple of months from him. Montas looks like he's starting to turn things around and starting to become really adjusted to pitching here in New York. As much as I don't like him as a person, Herman's been really good since coming off the IL. Cole, he's had his clunkers, but for the most part has been what you would expect him to be. He hasn't been, at that DeGrom Scherzer level this year, but he's had his 4 or 5 clunkers, but for the most part has pitched like the ace you need him to be. And then you get what you've getting out of Nestor Cortez, who's going to come off the IL on Thursday. Starting pitching's been fine. And even pieces in the bullpen are starting to shape into form. Like Loizaga looking like the guy he was last year, and the work that you've gotten out of pieces like Ron Marinaccio and even Lou Trevino since he got over here. The problem is this offense is not doing a damn thing unless it's Aaron Judge hitting a home run. I mean, look at over the weekend. They lose 2 out of 3 to the Rays, their closest competition in the American League East. And Judge scored all 3 runs that they scored in this series with his 2 home runs and then the sac fly he scored on in the 8th inning. I mean, it's pitiful watching this offense. And my big problems are here, the fact that outside of yesterday, they've scored barely over 2 runs a game for the last 24 games. And B, there's no accountability in this lineup. There's none of this, if you hit, you'll play. If you don't hit, you're going to sit down. Aaron Hicks continues to get preferential treatment in this lineup just based on Cashman and his goons wanting to justify that stupid contract they gave him once upon a time. Or Isaiah Falefa has been a nice little singles hitter this year, but let's face it, despite what you look at on the stat sheet, his defense has been atrocious. He has not gotten enough errors thrown his way, mostly because some of these hometown scorekeepers, when they've been on the road, have wanted to give a little homerism and call certain things that he should have made the play on a hit when it really was an error. Plus, we've seen how bad his throwing arm is from shortstop. So I don't want to hear anybody with his range or that the fact that his WAR in defense in baseball is 9th amongst shortstops. Please, that's a bunch of nonsense. Watch him play and you'll see he has not been a great shortstop this year. And that's why I don't understand how you bring up Peraza on Friday and Peraza's playing like every other day, but you're continuing to play IKF each day. IKF was never meant to be a roadblock for either Peraza or Volpe, whichever one of these kids was ready to come up first. He was meant to be a placeholder. And you do not bring up a young prospect, a prospect that, remember, Cashman refused to trade this guy at the deadline to get the likes of Luis Castillo or any other big-time pitcher that could have been available, was willing to settle for the Montas deal because he didn't have to give up anybody in the top 10 of their prospects in this organization. You do not bring up this kind of prospect unless you're going to play him every day. I mean, you've been playing Cabrera each and every single day, and he's nowhere near the level of a prospect that Peraza is supposedly supposed to be. And so between those two guys, and then Donaldson yesterday not running out of the box on a fly ball to left field, getting thrown out by a mile at second base. Lucky the Judge was running hard, or they wouldn't have scored that run in the first inning. There's no accountability here. But, Boone, for as much tough talk as he tries to show in the postgame press conferences or confidence he tries to show in players, he's a front man. I've told you guys this before. Anybody who's wanted to put this at the feet of Aaron Boone, you're looking at the wrong person. You should be looking at Brian Cashman because he constructed this roster poorly. He made trades that were nonsensical. I mean, it's one thing you want to get rid of Gary Sanchez, but clearly Josh Donaldson is looking like he's on the back 5 of his career rather than the front 9 of Augusta. And adding that $50 million. Or, like I've said for years, why you would give Aaron Hicks a 7-year contract extension when that year prior was the only year he had stayed healthy or consistently performed is beyond me. But it goes back years. They've built this team where if they're not hitting home runs, they're not scoring runs. They've cared more about this all or nothing approach and this nonsense with the launch angle than they have about putting together consistent at-bats. Yeah, they take pitches, sometimes too much for my liking. But, when the home runs go dry, you've got to find another way to score runs. You've got to find another way to put together some form of offensive consistency. And so far, you're not seeing that in the last 2 months from this Yankee team. That's why I am so looking forward to next year, the defensive shift in all likelihood being outlawed in this sport. Because that is what's led a lot of people saying, oh, baseball's boring, or that they can't watch it anymore because it's a 3 true outcomes kind of sport. Home run, strikeout, or walk. Because they teach these guys, oh, if you can't beat the shift, just hit it over them. And that's what the Yankees have become, because they get shifted just like everyone else. But rather than try to hit the ball the other way or maybe lay down a bunt every once in a while, they're always just trying to hit it a mile over the seats. And that the only guy that's done that on a consistent basis this year is Aaron Judge. So it's been frustrating. It's been aggravating. Now, I know there's a lot of fan bases out there that have said, oh, who cares? You're just whiny, you're complaining. Your team, you've gotten to see your team win at least 5 championships in your lifetime. And while all of that is 100% true, still, this is not what you would expect out of this Yankee team, especially some of these series that they're losing to teams. Splitting 4 games against the Oakland A's, losing 2 out of 3 to the Anaheim Angels, especially when they're not even pitching Shohei Ohtani, and while Trout is doing absolutely nothing. So it's frustrating. It's been annoying, and you hope that these next 3 days are the get right series. Because to be blunt, and excuse my language here, the Minnesota Twins since 2002 have been the New York Yankees' bitch. Okay? It doesn't matter who is in uniform. Whether it was the Joe Mauer, Justin Morneau, Johan Santana group, a group that had a lot of talented players. Remember that team, not just those 3 guys. They had Joe Nathan as their closer. You had Torrey Hunter there, Michael Kadire, Jason Kubel. That was a representable baseball team that won a lot, was in the postseason a lot, but would always run into the Yankees, and didn't matter how hot they were or how cold the Yankees were, they met up in the regular season, whether it be Old Yankee Stadium, New Yankee Stadium, the Metrodome, Target Field. The Yankees would find a way each and every single time to either kick their ass or give them as heartbreaking and demoralizing a loss as you could imagine a baseball team having to suffer. So this, I'm sure I've said this 2 or 3 times over the last month, this has to be the get right time. This has to be go time. Because Toronto and Tampa are breathing right down your necks. I don't believe that the Yankees are going to get much help over the next couple days with Tampa playing the Boston Red Sox. And Toronto looks ready to just pulverize the Baltimore Orioles right into the ground as they continue their 4-game set the next couple days. And both these teams are just 5 games behind the Yankees, whereas a month and a half ago, they were 15 to 16 games back. So it's time to go. It's time to wake the hell up and start being the New York Yankees. And not just sitting there on your hands and relying on Aaron Judge to carry you and save the day. All right, a lot to get to for the next about 45 minutes or so here. Give you some thoughts on the wild card standings in Major League Baseball, what the Mets are dealing with right now, an expansion to the college football playoffs, some contract news in the NFL, as well as pay some respect to one of the GOATs in sports, likely calling it a career. So plenty to get to over the next, what we said, about 40, 45 minutes or so here. So like I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, hell, put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
As annoyed and disappointed as I have been with the way the Yankees have played the last 2 matches, rather long stretch of baseball. Recently, it has not been all kumbaya for the Mets either, because their sizable lead in the National League East has come crawling back to them based on things happening within and what's going on around them. Because, let's face it, the Atlanta Braves just won't stop coming, are on a streak since, beginning of June when Acuna came back. They've essentially lapped the Mets when it comes to run differential and runs scored, and have been an unstoppable force both at home and on the road. They did have that little period where they got slowed down by the Mets a bit with that 5-game set about a month ago where they lost 4 out of 5. But since then, have been on fire, have crawled back within one game of the Mets in the loss column. That's why this weekend really hurt for the Mets when you take into account two things. A, how the hell are you losing to the Washington Nationals? I don't want to hear the excuses about, it was the bullpen's fault that, Ottavino faltered late on Saturday. You scored 1 run on back-to-back days to Patrick Corbin, who's been awful since signing that contract with the Nationals. And then Eric Fetty, who's quite frankly lucky to be in the big leagues. And the Mets have been a team that have been pretty good hitting with runners in scoring position all year long. And you only drive in 1 run on back-to-back nights against the Nationals. That was pathetic. That was pitiful to watch. Now, maybe some of it on Saturday night was being demoralized by the little bit of an injury scare that you had. And I shouldn't call it an injury scare because there's no actual injury. It was just precaution. But Max Scherzer leaving the game in the 5th inning due to left side fatigue. Not what you want if you're a Mets fan or a Mets player. Not something that you really want to sit there and see, especially a month before the postseason begins. At a time where, let's face it, as long as the Mets hold on to their division lead, they are going to be the number 2 seed in the National League postseason. And that's important because you get that first round bye. You don't have to deal with the nonsense of the 2 out of 3 wildcard rounds. So even with the slide that the Yankees have been on and how annoyed I've been at their play, with 27 games left to go, they still have a 12-game lead over the third place team in the American League and will likely avoid playing in that first week of the postseason. But you don't want Scherzer going down now. And you concern yourself with this because remember, early in the year, he had the oblique problem. And we know that even though it's been 2 months since he came back, at the age he's at and how violent his delivery is, that's what I'm surprised he's been such a workhorse over his career. He's a physical marvel. He is 38 years old. He does have a lot of mileage on that body. And you don't want him to get hurt right now. That's why, normally he's a guy that toughs it out. He's a guy that wants to be the toughest guy in the room, toughest guy on the team. But he took the smart approach with discretion is the better part of valor approach on Saturday, pulling himself from that game. And now hopefully it's not something that repops up in his next start. His next start probably going to take place against these Pittsburgh Pirates over the next couple days. They do have that doubleheader coming up tomorrow. Not sure if he's going to be fitting in there or be in the series after that. But this has to be, like I talked about with the Yankees in the series against the Twins, this series against the Pirates has to be a get-right series. You have to start rebuilding up ground because you played the Atlanta Braves in the last week of the season. You don't want that series to matter. You don't want that series to have any importance because then all of the demons of the Mets pass. And I know it's a different team, different manager. There's a different feel to this clubhouse. But that mindset is still something that lingers over this fan base. And you don't want something like that to continue to be a thing, should we say. Now, we look at, with about a month ago here, we look at these playoff standings. And in the National League, you're going to have a dogfight to the end between the Mets and the Braves, it looks like. In the Central, the Cardinals have pulled away from the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't know whether it's the Brewers being demoralized based on the Josh Hader trade or if it's just some of the injuries they've had to their starting pitching rotation this year, or just the fact that the Cardinals have been awesome since acquiring Jordan Montgomery and are getting an extra little boost off of this last hurrah by Albert Pujols. But they've essentially put the Milwaukee Brewers in the rearview mirror when it comes to the Central. And we know what the story is out west with the Dodgers essentially preparing for the postseason as we speak. So right now, it's going to come down to 3 teams for 2 spots because the runner-up in the National League East is a shoo-in. They've got a 10.5 game. The Braves have a 10.5 game lead over the Phillies. So you're going to have Phillies, Padres, and Brewers battling it out for these last 2 spots. Phillies, who just got Bryce Harper back in there the last couple weeks. The Brewers, who I don't know what to think out of them. And then there's the Padres, who are on a 3-game losing streak. And the Padres could be the dangerous team here. But the problem I've always had with the Padres, actually 2 problems here. One, Josh Hader needs to be Josh Hader. I don't know what the hell happened to this guy. The first 3 months of the year, he was the best closer in the sport. He looked like Josh Hader. The last 2 months, he's been a disaster. So much so that a week into being traded to the Padres, he's been removed from the closer role. If they're going to go anywhere, you need to be able to shut these games down because there's nothing more demoralizing in the postseason than battling your ass off for 8 innings and then handing the ball off to a closer who can't get the job done, who doesn't finish the job in the 9th inning. And I saw this segment on the MLB Network the other day, hosted by Brian Kenny, where he talked about how, we've seen where these elite closers in this era where it's going out there all or nothing for an inning, and they just seemingly fall apart. Brought up Chapman, Kimbrel, Jansen, who were the standard bearers for closers for the last 8 or 9 years, had that incredible peak, and then all of a sudden fell off the face of the earth where Chapman's not even an average usable reliever anymore, and Jansen and Kimbrel are just kind of okay closers at this point. Well, we haven't seen a guy like this with Hader where he just falls apart mid-season. It hasn't even just been, it's a precipitous drop where you saw signs of this coming in previous years. No, it's just in the middle of this year, whether he lost life on his fastball, he lost confidence in the strike zone, something along the way has fallen apart for Josh Hader. And they need to get that right. They need to have that consistency at the back end of their bullpen with him closing out. Because the rest of their roster, on paper, it's pretty good. On paper, you look around, you've got a star-filled lineup even without Fernando Tatis. You've got a lineup being carried or that can be carried by Juan Soto and Manny Machado. A starting rotation that can probably match up with almost anybody in the postseason. But they need to be able to close these games because even as a wild card, they could be dangerous this postseason. Now you look at it in the American League, the Astros, thanks to the Yankees slide, have been able to take a sizable lead for the best record in the American League as far as home field advantage would be concerned for the postseason. But right now, it looks like we do have our playoffs almost completely set. I mean, you look in the Central, there's probably going to be a heated race to the end between the top three teams there, although I don't have confidence in Tony La Russa to be able to completely guide that ship. I mean, they're the most confounding team in this sport. They're a game over 500, but have a run differential of minus 26. So you look at that division, it's likely going to be a one team comes out of their division because the American League East teams have blown right by the Twins. You know, these next couple days are an important series for the Minnesota Twins. If they were to lose 3 out of 4 or get swept by the Yankees, that could be it for them. That could be the death nail for them because they are 6.5 games back at Toronto for the final wild card spot in the American League. And Toronto is playing the Orioles the next couple days. The Orioles, who have been that cute, fun story this year, been probably one of the biggest surprises in the American League, but have now lost 3 in a row, got swept in a doubleheader by the Blue Jays yesterday where Bichette was drilling home runs all over the place. So you're looking at a likelihood, unless one of the Rays or Blue Jays catch up to the Yankees, where your 3 American League wildcard teams are the Rays, the Mariners, and the Blue Jays. And the team that is probably taking the most solace, the most enjoyment over what they're doing right now is the Seattle Mariners, because it's been a long time since they made the postseason. The last time they made the playoffs was that record-setting 2001 season they had, in which they set a big league record of 116 wins in the regular season, but got derailed in the postseason when they ran into the Yankees in the American League Championship Series. And so much so that the Yankee fans were chanting Oakland's better at them as they were falling short in that series. And you think about how much has changed since then. I mean, we're 3 U.S. presidents removed from that. I was in the 7th grade the last time they made the postseason, and just last week I turned 34. So much has changed since the Mariners' last postseason bid. So, good for them, good for their fan base in finally getting there. I thought about a week ago maybe there was a chance in the National League that maybe the Diamondbacks could make some noise, especially when you see the great seasons that their 2 aces, Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen, are having. But it's going to be just way too much. They're not going to make up 8 games in this final less than 30 games to go. Neither the Phillies, Padres, or Brewers are going to lose enough to get them in. But I figured I would mention them because they've been hot since the middle of August, have been a really good story. And, they have what every team is looking for. Young, controllable aces and pitchers that could potentially dominate in the postseason. And that's what you need. You need in the playoffs 3 things. I mentioned a closer that can close games out. But you need starting pitchers that you can trust, that can match up against any other teams 1, 2, and 3. And finally, you need the timely hits. You're not going to have a whole bunch of guys hitting 400 in the postseason. I mean, you look back at the late 90s Yankees, the batting averages of the likes of Tino Martinez, Scott Brosius, and others were nothing to write home about in those playoffs. But we remember them and love them because they came up with the timely hits at the right time. They may have hit, 215, 230, something like that in a given postseason. But when the time was right, they came up with that clutch hit that put them over the top. So that's what you need going down the stretch here, going into this postseason. Healthy and good starting pitching, timely hitting, and a closer that you can give the ball to that will slam the door and not give you that demoralizing loss when it really counts. All right, going to take another break here. When I come back, turn my attention to football, where some big changes are coming in college football, and some people have some decision times coming up in the NFL. Continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
Connecticut School of Broadcasting founder Dick Robinson.
You know, the media business has changed a lot since we opened our doors in 1964. Now media content is everywhere. On air, online, on the go. More than ever, companies are looking for people to help drive this new media.
At Connecticut School of Broadcasting, you'll get hands-on training on the latest software and equipment in a matter of months, not years. Connecticut School of Broadcasting has placed thousands of grads in broadcast media careers.
It's all about versatility. You see, at a radio station, if you also know how to shoot, edit, and post videos, you become a pretty hot commodity. That's the training you get at Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
Connecticut School of Broadcasting, with locations up and down the East Coast, from Massachusetts to Miami. Call 1-800-TV-RADIO or log on to GoCSB.com. Connecticut School of Broadcasting, the nation's oldest and largest group of broadcast media schools, redefining training in radio, TV, and new media. Get trained. Get connected. 1-800-TV-RADIO.
In certain circumstances, I am a believer in the theory of less is more. Sometimes, we always talk about in not just sports, but life in general. We want more of something. We want more. We want, the best possible scenario. We want the best possible situation. Well, sometimes in those cases, more is not always the best thing. Sometimes more will dilute it. Sometimes having more of something dilutes the thing that we like, the thing that we love. And that's the feeling I almost get in this scenario when it comes to college football. The announcement that they made over the weekend, the board of managers got together for the college football playoff, and it approved a system that will increase the current playoff format from 4 teams up to 12 teams as late as 2026 and as early as 2024. Now, I can remember a time not so long ago where we had that nonsensical system called the BCS, and the computers decided which 2 teams would be playing for the national championship that year based off strength of schedule, home and away wins, conference strength, yada, 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 a whole bunch of things that at times didn't make a lot of sense, and it left a lot of people up in arms, annoyed that you didn't have more teams with a chance. And while I liked and thought it was a good idea going to 4 teams, I knew that eventually there was going to come a day where they increased it from 4, not just based on competitive situations, because at times you do see those 5th, 6th, and even 7th teams that have a legitimate argument, but because why everything in life is decided. The almighty dollar. Money talks, as we know. And these college football playoff managers, they can see that, having more college football playoff games would probably be better financially for them with TV partners and with fan attendance at these games than it would continuing with some of these nonsensical, irrelevant bowl games that they put on each and every December that over the last couple of years I've grown to watch less and less of, unless there's an intriguing matchup. But to jump from 4 to 12, a bit aggressive. I would have been okay if you went from 4 to 6 and had play-in games in the first round, had the 1 and 2 seeds get a first round bye, and then go from there. Hell, even would have been good with 8. But 12 is too big a jump. Even you look at all the professional sports, or all the other professional sports, because I guess we can now put college football in the professional sports realm with this NIL deal that the players are making money off of. It was slow, incremental increases in their postseason. The NFL didn't just wake up one day and decide they're going to have a 14-team playoff. Hell, Major League Baseball didn't just wake up one day and decide they were going to have a 12-team playoff. Remember, there was back a day once upon a time where you had 2 divisions in each league, and only 4 teams would make Major League Baseball's postseason. That was in my lifetime, in fact. That was a thing. Pre-1995, pre-strike. And now we're sitting here almost 30 years later, and we slowly crawling to the point where we had wild card teams. You had 3 divisions in each league. Now you have multiple wild card teams making it to the point where you have buys in the postseason. Why did we have to, as I said, money talks, but you had to jump all the way from 4 to 12 immediately, especially when you look at what would be, if we're going based on preseason rankings, this would be the college football playoff right now. Your 4 first-round buys, the 1 through 4 seeds, would be Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson. The alpha dogs, as we sit here today in the sport. The only teams that I think a lot of people think have a legitimate shot at winning a national championship. Then you would have your 5 versus 12, Notre Dame versus Oklahoma State. 6 versus 11, Texas A&M versus Oregon. 7 versus 10, Utah versus Baylor. And your 8 versus 9, Michigan versus Oklahoma. In all likelihood, those 4 teams would get waxed by the top 4 seeds in the second round. So, quite frankly, this all feels like a waste of time. This feels like, let's throw the Pac-12 and those rare out of Power 5 conference schools that have a great record a bone here and think that they have a legitimate shot, when we know in the end it's still likely going to be one of those top 4 teams that is going to be holding up the championship in the end. You're just now asking them to play one more game than they really need to play. And like I said, you're just trying to placate the Pac-12, but the Pac-12 tried to eliminate themselves from any consideration of this over the weekend. Oregon got smoked by Georgia on a neutral field. And that's going to hurt them when it comes to rankings as we go on. Probably going to push them out of the top 20 when the new coaches polls and AP rankings come out this week. And then Utah lost a late lead on the road against Florida, had a chance to win in the end, but Cam Rising threw that interception at the goal line to give them a really costly loss. Those are the kind of things that you can't go on the road if you want to be taken seriously as a playoff contender, as a possible national championship contender, and lose a road game against an SEC school. And I know Florida is not yet back to the level that they once were, but like I said, that's an SEC program that you went on the road against and lost, blew a late lead against when you were the favorites going in. So all of this to me just seems like a bit much, a little bit too soon. Now, I was very surprised about this, and this just goes to show how, sometimes, wrong I can be about a situation and how much it sucks that I'm not live and only do this once a week. Because this time about 8 days ago, I was telling you all how Jimmy Garoppolo is a soon-to-be former San Francisco 49er. And now we sit here 8 days later, and he's reworked his deal and will be a San Francisco 49er for this season, becoming the highest paid backup in the league, getting 1 year for $6.5 million with roster bonuses and incentives based on playing time that could get him up to $16 million this season. Tells me a couple of things here. A, nobody wanted to trade for this guy. No one wanted to trade for him, even though he's a good quarterback. One never call him elite. But you can win games with Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterback. No one wanted to give up assets to get him from the San Francisco 49ers, whether it's they were worried about his shoulder or the Niners were asking for too much, hoping to get back a second-round draft pick like they did to originally get him from the Patriots years ago. There were no takers. The only teams that were interested in him were waiting for the 49ers to cut him loose, and they had until this Saturday to make that decision when his $26 million due this coming year would have been guaranteed, and they could not have that on their books. They also want him to remain there based on the fact that he's been a good soldier, hasn't whined and complained about this entire situation, has realized that it was time for them to move on to Trey Lance. But is there, in case Trey Lance either gets hurt or say the first month of the season, first month and a half of the season, Trey Lance shows he's not ready. It's not his time yet. He's still very raw, and this is not a scenario that will just get better as the season goes on. You can turn to Jimmy if there's any hiccups in this and have a solid, winnable quarterback take over that scenario for you for a team that, on paper has a legitimate shot to make the postseason. A lot of it is going to depend on, who else you look at, who else you consider is a real threat as a wild card in the NFC, because they're still a bit behind the Rams. Even with the Rams losing some people in this offseason, losing the likes of Von Miller, not sure if they're bringing back Odell, and even if they do, when he'd be ready, still are on the high of highs of coming off of winning a Super Bowl last year, have the best receiver in the sport in Cup, and have a coach in Sean McVay that I'm more confident in than I am with Kyle Shanahan, and for my money, still have the best defensive player in this sport in Aaron Donald. So things break right for the 49ers. They can make the playoffs, but a lot of it is going to rely on, is Trey Lance truly ready for this spot? And if not, would they turn to Jimmy at some point this year rather than it being a retool year and a waste of a season? And talk about a team looking to retool. That's exactly the position that the Denver Broncos have put themselves in with the contract extension that they gave to Russell Wilson last week. Because on paper, people look at it and say, oh, 5 years for $245 million, $165 million guaranteed. Isn't that going to hurt your salary cap? Well, you forget that the salary cap goes up every year. They've recovered well from the pandemic year where no one made money. And let's look at how the contract is structured. He gets a $50 million signing bonus that will be divided over the course of a 5-year stretch between 2024 and 2028. Based on, he restructured what was left of his Seattle contract for the next 2 years and essentially added 5 years onto the back half of this. And right now, he only has a base salary this year of $2 million. Next year, his base salary is $8 million. The following year, it jumps up to 17, and then after that is when it really starts stacking up. But you look at the next couple of years, his salary next year will only account for about 2% of the projected salary cap. And in 2024, his salary will only take up about 6% of the projected salary cap. So you're getting a top-of-the-line, top-notch quarterback almost for the next couple of years at a discount. And Russell Wilson, even though he only has one championship on his marker, and that championship was mostly due to Seattle's ground game and defense, he's been, if nothing else, the model of consistency and a top-tier quarterback in this league for the last 8-9 years. And you look at it over the course of Wilson's career, he has only missed 3 starts. And that kind of consistency is important for a Broncos franchise that has gone through 11 quarterbacks since Peyton Manning retired after the 2015 season. You know, he even said it himself last week that he wants not only to be able to win championships, but for this contract to create enough space in the salary cap to make magic and allow guys to come in, making this a destination location, like what they did in the offseason in bringing in a Randy Gregory. I mean, you look at the Peyton Manning era, that was a destination location with the likes of DeMarcus Ware, TJ Ward, Aqib Talib, Emmanuel Sanders. All of those guys played a big role in winning Super Bowl 50. And that's what the Broncos are hoping that this contract extension does more of and the same when locking up Russell Wilson. This is a contract that they are not soon going to regret. And now you talk about contract extensions. We're less than 1 week away from the start of the season. 5 days away from the first Sunday of the year. And Lamar Jackson set Sunday as the deadline for contract extension, which I've said plenty of times. I don't understand the way that he's handling this. I don't understand the way anyone with the Ravens is handling this. Why, A, they're not willing to give him as much guaranteed money as, say, the likes of Kyler Murray or Deshaun Watson are getting from their respective teams. Because he's been more consistent than Kyler Murray. And unlike Deshaun Watson, you don't have to worry about character concerns off the field when it comes to Lamar Jackson. He's been everything you could ask for a first-round pick. Just hasn't gotten that championship yet, and he's still young in his career. I mean, he already ranks 7th all-time in rushing yards amongst quarterbacks, has had 10 career performances of 100 or more rushing yards, tied with Mike Vick for the most in NFL history. He's been a league MVP. He's won playoff game for this franchise. It's been a seamless transition from the Joe Flacco era to Lamar, and you have that electricity of a dual threat quarterback here who last year, yes, he dealt with some health issues, but has shown incredible durability even with the type of player that he is. Why would you let this draw out to the point where you've got to place franchise tags on him? Franchise tags that he'd make a hell of a lot of money. I mean, you look at if he got tagged after this year, the exclusive tag would be for over $45 million, while the non-exclusive tag would be $34 million. And for those of you who are not aware what that means, the exclusive tag means that only the Ravens can negotiate with Lamar. The non-exclusive tag means other teams would be able to set up visits with him and can make him offers, even sign him to an offer sheet. But the Ravens would have the right to match that or accept him leaving as a franchise tagged free agent, but would get 2 first-round picks from that team. And they determine the franchise tag based on the average annual salary of the 5 highest paid players in the sport at that given position. So if he got tagged after this year, then next year that would jump up 20%, and the non-exclusive tag would be $40 million, and the non-exclusive tag would be over $54 million. So over the next 2 years, if he doesn't sign a deal, he could still make somewhere between $75 and $100 million over the course of a 2-year deal. But why would you tempt fate if you're either side here? If you're the Ravens, wanting to pay a guy $50 million and not lock him up to a long-term security of having multiple years on the contract with a high guarantee, potentially pissing him off to the point where when he does become a full free agent, he just decides to walk. And if you're Lamar, A, why would you take the field without a contract extension after last year's injury? B, why would you cut off negotiations right away at opening day? And C, why do you have an agent? Why do you not have an agent? Why are you doing the negotiations yourself? Because as we've seen a lot of times in all of these sports, sometimes things are said in the meeting rooms, in the negotiating rooms, that you're not going to want to hear. So, to me, it would be in everyone in the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar's best interest if sooner rather than later they got a deal done. And Lamar, hire an agent just so you don't have to continuously hear about this nonsense or potentially hear things that you don't want to hear from their front office. All right, going to take one last break here. Come back, finish things up with some thoughts on the Knicks as well as the likely end of one of America's greatest athletes. Continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
been pretty honest about it, whether it be friends and family or to all of you on this podcast, that there is clearly a hierarchy for yours truly when it comes to my sports interest and fandom on what I like to watch and what I root for the most. As far as overall sports and leagues are concerned, I would say the hierarchy starts at this. It's baseball, basketball, and football up here. Probably baseball, football, and then basketball. Hockey's right about here. And then you got UFC just down here, and then everyone else is down there. I don't watch much tennis or golf to really be considered an aficionado or expert on those. But when there's big things happening in those sports, I watch enough, I pay attention enough so that I know what the hell is going on, so that I know what people are talking about, what people are interested in it. Tiger Woods is in a close race in the final 9 on a Sunday. I'm going to flip over and watch some golf. Normally I don't watch golf, but I will check it out. More times than not, I'm not waking up in the wee early hours of the morning to watch Wimbledon or the French Open. But when you have Nadal, Federer, or you have one of the Williams sisters going for a Grand Slam, that captures my attention and I want to wake up and see it. So I was, of course, keeping an eye on the U.S. Open taking place over the last week and a half in New York, wanting to see what, in all likelihood, is the last ride of the career of the great Serena Williams. And great is an understatement. This is one of not just the greatest tennis players of all time. This is one of the most dominant athletes in American history. This is not just a gem of a human being, but a gem of a specimen, a physical specimen in her given profession. When you look at the career that she's had, 85% winning percentage, over 70 career titles, including the 23 Grand Slam titles, and done it on every match surface possible along the way, even winning doubles championships with her sister Venus. It has been an absolutely remarkable ride that this woman has been on for the last 25 years here. Utter domination. She should be very proud of her career. Her parents, her family should all be very proud of her. And, she said last month in Vogue magazine that while she wasn't announcing her retirement, that it was a time for her to evolve away from tennis toward other things that are more important to her, whether it be family, business ventures. Everyone knows when it's that time to step away, and she has finally decided to call it a career and move on to other things in her life. And I watched on Friday as she valiantly went down fighting like the true champion she was. You wouldn't expect anything different. You wouldn't expect her to feign some kind of injury or just flat out give up, till the very end, till match point against Aliyah Tomajovanic. Hopefully I pronounced that right. She fought. She gave us everything she had, and I almost felt bad for the other girl because here she is. She's winning a match to move on in the U.S. Open, and all of the attention is on Serena, but I think it's understandable in this circumstance because we're talking about arguably the greatest of all time, either men's or women's tennis, finally calling it a career. Now, what I don't like is some of the bitterness that I've seen and heard come out the last couple of days from someone in her own right who has an argument to be made for being the GOAT, for being the best of all time in Margaret Court. Margaret Court, of course, is the lone woman in women's tennis that has more career Grand Slam titles than Serena Williams. And she's at 24 while Serena is at 23. And Serena had long been trying to chase after her, had not won a title in the last couple of years. But Margaret Court, in the last couple of days, has come out with this grouchy, bitter, almost old woman, get off my lawn kind of attitude when it comes to her saying that, Serena played 7 more years than I did. I finished in my early 30s. People forget I took 2 years out, had 2 babies when I was 25, and then returned to tennis. I got married and had one of my best years, winning 24 out of 25 tournaments. I don't understand. Are you that jealous that somebody else has spotlight, that somebody else has attention brought onto them? What this feels a lot like is as Mariano Rivera, who most people with a working brain consider the greatest closer and greatest relief pitcher in the history of Major League Baseball. As he was setting all those records, franchise records for saves in the season, setting the record for most saves in the American League history as well as baseball history, every time that was brought up, who would come out all grouchy, moaning, whining, complaining, trying to discount what Mo was doing? Fellow Hall of Famer Goose Gossage. Because, Rivera's in an era where saves are one-inning scenarios rather than in his era, they were doing it for 2 or 3 innings. Saying that, he'd have 1,000 saves if he pitched in this era. I don't understand why these old-time athletes always have to seem so bitter or grouchy. You don't see Billie Jean King having this kind of grouchiness come out. And remember, she dealt with a lot of sexism thrown her way during her career. Margaret Court, her career deserves to be respected. Yeah, she won 24 slams over a 13, 14-year run. But that doesn't mean we can't give credit and show respect to someone else who had a remarkable, phenomenal run. The fact that you're using what you did, you're using your situation to try and discredit and try to take away all of this celebration, this culmination of this great career, thought that really made her look small. Really thought that rather than enhanced her legacy, made her legacy look less than what it should be. Now, finally, one of the NBA's lone question marks of the offseason came to an end last week when the Cleveland Cavaliers acquired Donavan Mitchell from the Utah Jazz. And like I talked about a couple weeks ago, the reason this took so long is because Danny Ainge almost got greedy. Danny Ainge set a price tag out there that it seemed like no one was going to or no one wanted to match. When you take into consideration that he was able to pull off the heist of the century in getting 4 unprotected draft picks for Rudy Gobert, something that the Minnesota Timberwolves front office should have their heads examined and made sure that there's a working brain in there. Rudy Gobert, good player, but not someone you're giving up that kind of price tag for. And Danny Ainge thought, if I can get that for Gobert, what could I get for Donovan Mitchell? But he finally had to swallow some pride in the last week and accept the deal from the Cavaliers, in which, you're getting a lot back. You're getting tradable assets in the likes of young players such as Lauri Markkanen, a rookie in Ochai Agbaji, and Colin Sexton, who you've been hearing trade rumors about him for the last year and a half in Cleveland. And all of these guys are still relatively young, all 25 years or younger. And Sexton, you just signed him to a 4-year extension for, workable money in today's day and age of the NBA. And along with it, you got 3 unprotected first-round draft picks, along with 2 pick swaps. But Cleveland comes out looking great here because they get, by most people's estimations, a top 20 player in this league, one of the better offensive point guards that we have in the sport, that is still very, very young, and didn't have to give up any, core pieces. Still have the likes of, Karis LeVert and Jared Allen there. Still have Rookie of the Year runner-up Evan Mobley. Still have Darius Garland, who broke out last year, was a first-time NBA All-Star. And this is a team that they're on the rise. Maybe they're not ready to win a championship yet or come out of the East when you still have the Bucks and the Celtics, the top dogs there. You can never rule out either Miami or Philadelphia, and we'll see what happens when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets. But this is a move as far as taking that next step for the Cavaliers. They could have rested on their laurels from last year of saying, this is the first time without LeBron James that we made the playoffs, that we were in the mix of things, because they had a winning record last year. They had the 8th best record in the East. They just came up short and lost back-to-back play-in games to the Nets and the Hawks. But they don't want to keep up with this, continuously rebuilding. You can only rebuild for so long. At some point, you got to take a shot. You got to make that move that shows, hey, we're not just a fun, cute story. We're serious about this. We want to take that next step toward being a great team, because even though, as Joakim Noah once said, what's so great about Cleveland? Who's really going to go there? You get a guy like this who, he's not on that LeBron, Durant, Giannis kind of level. He's not a top 10 player, but you get an all-star, a perennial all-star, guy who's a top 20, 25 player in this sport there. Then that eventually could convince an even better player than him to get there, and yet closer and closer to that dream of being a championship contender. Because, so many of these teams, they want to skip steps. They want to just jump from being a dump right up to being a championship team. No, it takes time. It takes time to build up to that. And sometimes you got to take, when you have that surprisingly fun season, like the Nets had 2 years ago, like the Knicks had the year after that, you got to be willing to make that next move, that next step. Now, the Nets did it in kind of selling their soul by letting D'Angelo Russell go and bringing in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. The Knicks, on the other hand, the following year did not make that move, did not take that next step. And that's why they're in the place that they are in now, where they missed the playoffs last year and still have, some bad contracts on the books like Evan Fournier, like the extension that they gave to Julius Randle, which at the time looked like a discount, now looks like a heaping pile of crap with the way he played and acted last year. But they did, whether it's begrudgingly, whatever their reasons are, did make a good move last week in locking up R.J. Barrett to a rookie extension, becoming the first player to sign a multi-year extension after their rookie deal with the Knicks since Charlie Ward back in '99. And that's how long it's been. I was in the 5th grade in 1999. But RJ Barrett, while he still has improvements to go in his game, still has to be a guy that is a bit more ambidextrous and not just shoot from one side of the court. You've seen his scoring totals go up each year. You saw his consistency go up as last season was going on. And look at him. He's 22 years old. He's 6'6", is capable of playing either the 2 or the 3. After 3 years, that would have been too soon to give up on this guy. I thought that, I understood why the Jazz wanted to get him in this deal. For them, he was the equivalent of what they were asking for from the Cavs in getting Colin Sexton. But with the Knicks, this is a young homegrown guy that has gotten better and better. And, his ceiling is probably to be a Donovan Mitchell type player, to be somewhere in that top 30 range of player in the NBA. Now, whether he gets to being there, it remains to be seen. But I would have been okay giving up the likes of Emmanuel Quickley or Obi Toppin, draft picks. I, for the life of me, don't understand what this obsession is of their deadlock in wanting to hold on to Quentin Grimes, considering he was in and out of the rotation last year. But to me, this was a good move for the Knicks. This was a good day, a good sign that they're still building towards something and not just wanting to ship away a young player for the quick fix. Now, I would have traded some of those other young pieces that I mentioned to get Donovan Mitchell along with draft picks, because they do have 11 draft picks over the next several years as far as their own, and the 7 that they've acquired over time to use in the right trade packages. But I would not have, just given up the entire farm for Donovan Mitchell, because we've seen the Knicks in that place way too many times. That's why they were in the position that they were in the Isaiah Thomas era and the early part of the Donnie Walsh era, where they were essentially having to drag themselves out of the gutter. But at some point, if you're a Knicks fan, while you like what they've done here, re-signing Barrett, bringing in Jalen Brunson, some of the young pieces that they still have as far as depth in this rotation, at some point, they've got to make that next move. They've got to make that move that is taking that next step. And, stop with all this nonsense about, getting Giannis here. Get that player that's on the equivalent, the level of a Donovan Mitchell. Get him here first, then we can talk about making that next move that convinces that even better player to come here. Stop trying to just skip steps, because, like I said, that is what's gotten you in the mess that you've been as a franchise for the last 20 plus years. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Tuesday, September 6th, 2022. everyone have a great night. Have a great week. Hey, football's right around the corner, people. It's happy time. So, everyone, please enjoy the start of the NFL season. Be back next week to break it all down. Until then, stay safe. Peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.